6 years ago, the Civil War began. An accident in Stamford left 600 people dead, and the public pointing fingers at the people they once called heroes. The superhero community divided itself over the issue of whether or not vigilantes should be forced to answer to the government. Iron Man led those who believed they should work with the government in order to restore public faith in the heroes. Captain America gathered a team of heroes in the name of freedom, becoming fugitives in the process. Sides were taken, lives were lost. Things had built up to what was supposed to be the final battle in Iron Man's secret prison. No war lasts forever. Things were supposed to end here. But on the strange planet known as Battleworld, one kingdom experienced a very different outcome. During the Battle of Prison 42, the heroes Black Panther and Dagger tried to find a way out of the complex, only to discover a self-destruct device. Realizing the incredible danger everyone was in, Black Panther ordered Dagger to find her companion Cloak and teleport the heroes to safety. He stayed behind, promising to buy as much time for them as he could. Meanwhile, Maria Hill contacted Tony and told him that Black Panther just activated their self-destruct protocols. Confused, Tony saw Cloak evacuating the other heroes, and Stark reprimanded Steve Rogers for resorting to such harsh tactics as to blow up the entire prison. Cloak saved as many people as he could that day, but he kept the portal open too long. The explosion from the self-destruct poured through his body and directly into the city of St. Louis. In an instant, Cloak, Mac Gargan, Tigra, Black Panther, Matt Murdock, Doc Samson, Janet Van Dyne, and 15 million other people died. The entire city was destroyed. And if Stamford was enough to divide the kingdom, this incident shattered it. Things got out of control. Can you imagine? 15 million people snuffed out in a single violent display for the entire kingdom to watch and be unable to do anything. People got angry. There weren't any sides in those early days, just chaos. Norman Osborn staged a coup, and it failed. The only way the public could cope was by making one person the good guy and another the bad. Blame was how people came to deal with this tragedy. And so everyone made a decision. Everyone had to ask themselves, whose side are you on? Cap and Tony probably didn't want to be leaders, but they accepted the roles thrust upon them. Iron Man took the East. There, today, a young girl named Heather takes flight for the first time. It is incredible, but it doesn't last long before she is intercepted by Ms. Marvel and a team of agents. The girl is startled, but Carol calms her down, sharing with her how great it is to be able to fly. Heather asks if she's in trouble, and Carol reassures her she is not. They just need to know who is flying and when. Everybody needs to be safe, and Heather was on a course directly towards a flight path. But that's okay. There are schools here for exactly that sort of thing. The girl asks if she has to leave her family. Stark brought order to the East. Laws and safety rule this land, and it came to be known as the Iron. Captain America took the West. Today, a young man named John is trying out his new powers for the first time as well. He is approached by a hero named Stature. Like Heather, John asks if he is in trouble. Stature says that out here, if he wants to blow stuff up, he should blow stuff up. But she suggests that he uses powers for good. After all, nobody wants punishers coming after them. Cap made a land with only 2 laws: hurt no one and help when you can. Otherwise, settlements were to govern themselves. Most lived their lives here in peace and happiness, but everyone knows what would happen if they broke either of the 2 laws. Attempt to break the law, and you'll have to face the Avengers. But if you actually succeed, if you actually do real harm to others, the new answer to is punishers. This is the Blue. And so things have come to this over the last 6 years. The Iron and the Blue. What was once a unified kingdom has been renamed the War Zone in recognition of this divided domain. The people found their way east or west, depending on what society suited them the most, with the border solidified by the divide created during that last tragic battle 6 years ago. This divide became entrenched in the minds of the people, who, to this day, have understandable, deep-seated feelings over St. Louis. Today, At this border, Miriam Sharp has come for a historic meeting. In spite of being one of the early proponents of the Registration Act, which was a major cause of the Civil War in the first place, she has since become a relentless advocate for peace. She even had a bridge built over the divide to symbolize the hope that one day, unity will be possible. Today, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are meeting for the first time in years. But Miriam truly believes that this long-standing, bitter rivalry can finally come to an end. A reporter asks if Miriam is afraid. Peace is not a popular sentiment among the public, even after all these years, and multiple threats have been made on her life. But Miss Sharp is not afraid. She will be in the company of two of the greatest heroes the world has ever known. Outside, Peter Parker asks Steve why they're even bothering to do this, and Rogers says that no matter what, he wants to at least try for peace. It doesn't matter how they feel about Tony and his gang, this is about everyone else. Tony is also nervous about this, but She-Hulk reassures him, and the two share a kiss. Jennifer asks Tony to make this work, and he promises to do whatever it takes. This needs to end. The two sides greet each other cordially, but there's already tension in the air. Peter is particularly unhappy to see Stark, openly stating he wants to punch Tony right in the face. Stark brushes off these words, though, and even offers Peter a gesture of goodwill. Parker is surprised when he sees his wife and child, who have chosen to live in the Arden, away from Peter. Both Tony and Steve happily let the man go and spend time with his family for the duration of these talks. Rogers comments that was kind of Tony to do, and Stark reminds his old friend that he's not a monster. Miriam declares that is an excellent note for talks to begin, and finally, the two leaders sit down together. Miriam thanks them both for coming, saying this is already a huge step. She asks both sides what it would take to reunite this land. Tony goes first, admitting they need space. The Arden's population is growing strong, but has run out of room. The Blue has twice the amount of land and half of their population. Tony also knows the biggest problem for the Blues is resources. Officially, only the Arden is recognized as a real kingdom of Battleworld, and as such is the only nation that can legally trade with other domains. But Steve says this won't be so simple. He doesn't want to be starved out and forced to give up his people's freedoms and land just so they can eat. He doesn't want to give up everything they fought for. The discussion quickly turns heated as old, angry feelings quickly boil to the surface, and Miriam tries to get the two men to calm down. Suddenly, Cap calls to Peter over his comms as Miriam lay dead before him. Peter activates his wings. Flying out, he spots the machine used to kill Miriam, but the shooter is nowhere to be found. Steve notes that the circumstances of the shot, and deduces that only Bullseye could have managed something like this, and that the assassination attempt was most definitely aimed at Rogers himself. Knowing that Bullseye works for Tony, Steve quickly blames Stark for all of this and moves to leave. Tony swears he had nothing to do with this, but Cap doesn't even care. That doesn't matter. Miriam is gone, and with it, the chance for peace. Tony got what he wanted. Stark will never let this war end, so it's time they end it for him. Quiet follows the days after the assassination, so Tony, uneasy about these events, sends out a drone into the Blue to investigate. However, it is shot down by Storm. She takes the device to a settlement called Steeltown, and brings the drone to Colossus to look into Tony's latest tech. Inside, they find a computer and agree to send it to General Rogers for analysis. As for the rest of the machine, Colossus promises that he and Magneto are sure to figure out a proportional response to it. Over in Resilient Alpha, capital city of the Arden, Bucky and Tony detect an incoming missile, with a message crudely attached to it. The missile bounces harmlessly off of Stark's headquarters, and Tony is not impressed by the words either, commenting that if the Blues really had a Hulk, they'd know about it by now. Tony calls Jennifer to meet him in one of his labs and wants to show her something that's been bothering him for some time. He presents her a timeline of events leading up to and as a result of the Civil War. The events highlighted in red were statistically improbable. The equivalent of lightning striking in the same spot twice, or winning a lottery every time you play. It's more than coincidence. This game is rigged. Both sides are being played. Tony believes the assassination was one in a long line of acts designed to keep the two sides of the war zone in firm opposition of one another. Who or what someone would have to gain from all of this, Tony cannot say, but the information is definitely disturbing. Meanwhile, in the City of Liberation, capital of the Blues, Hank McCoy, Steve Rogers, and Peter Parker are checking in on the Sandman. The villain was found by the Punishers hiding out on a dirt road, where he had been preying on unsuspecting travelers. But rather than being punished, Sandman has accepted an offer for life in prison instead. The Beast activates a new device he has been working on, and in mere moments, the Sandman is stripped of his powers. This was an early test for Beast's invention, but it is only the beginning. Peter, still mired with bitter feelings over the Civil War, is eager to use this technology against the Iron's forces. However, Beast points out a problem in the plan. This device, which they are calling Bell Curve, requires a heavy amount of resources that the Blues simply don't have. If they want to use Bell Curve as a weapon, they'll have to steal more supplies from the Iron. Peter volunteers for a mission to do just that, and though Steve accepts this, the man warns his friend not to let his feelings for Mary Jane cloud his judgment. After all, millions of the people in the Blue are depending on him. Meanwhile, the drone Tony sent out did give them one lead. Whoever killed Miriam fled to Steeltown, deep within the Blue. They've never had a better lead, so Tony asks Jennifer to infiltrate their enemy's territory and investigate things further. She agrees, not because Tony's big Civil War puzzle really interests her, but in order to bring Miriam's killer to justice. As Jennifer heads into the Blue alone, Peter forms a team consisting of Elektra, the new Black Panther, and Venom. Each of these heroes has a score to settle with the Iron. Elektra wants payback for Matt Murdock's death. Azari wishes to restore honor to the Black Panther lineage. And Venom, now working with Clint Barton, needs closure over what happened to his old host, Matt Gargan. As for Peter, well, he just wants his family back. They attack an Iron facility guarded by massive suits of Tony's armor and begin a fierce battle. Elektra is vaporized by one of the suits, but Peter is able to use his webbing to defeat the machines. Black Panther is mournful of their companion's death, but Peter only cares about the mission right now. As he approaches the base, he notices Venom lingering behind. The symbiote quietly grabs one of Elektra's weapons, Daredevil's old billy club, follows the two heroes into the base. Jennifer approaches a checkpoint into Steeltown. Though she uses a cover identity as a lawyer here for an emergency meeting, the guards insist she go through a second set of scans. She is approached by Professor Charles Xavier, who begins to scan her mind to make sure the woman is who she says she is. After a brief pause, he clears her to enter the city. Inside, Jennifer contacts Tony and confirms their suspicions about psychics being used at checkpoints like this. She-Hulk was able to get past Xavier only because he's not nearly at full strength anymore, and comments just how old the man looks these days. As she walks by a bar, one of the patrons recognizes her. Back in Resilient, Bucky reassures Tony that Jennifer will be fine, but that's not what is bothering Stark. He asks his friend if he's been doing the right thing all this time. Bucky argues that Tony held the Iron together when nobody else could. The fact that this war is still going on is not his fault. Stark comments that lately, he's been thinking the exact same thing. Inside the Iron base, the heroes work their way past the automated guards and come across Wilson Fisk. Or at least what's left of him. Apparently, the Kingpin captured Dr. Octopus and stripped the villain of his artificial limbs, sticking them to Fisk's own body. But the synthetic limbs, they had a mind of their own, and they loved Otto. The second Kingpin had those arms attached to him, they electrocuted the man to death. They kept his corpse, as it seems they need a host to move around, and thus King Oct was born. Stark captured this being and set it up here to design new tech. While looking on at this thing, the machine suddenly attacks, recognizing Parker. It slams Peter and the others around viciously. However, using Daredevil's clubs, Venom is able to smash through Wilson Fisk's decaying head, immobilizing the entire creature. Peter thanks Clint and points out that both Elektra and Daredevil would have been happy over this, given their history with the Kingpin. With the situation under control, it's time for the team to get what they came for and get out. In Steeltown, Jennifer is able to track down Bullseye, but as she spies on him, she is approached by the man she saw earlier. His name is Speedball, and he's a Punisher. He remembers Jennifer well, as she helped the man long ago during the early days of the Civil War. He doesn't forget that, and promises to be kind to her, but he does have a job to do. She-Hulk lashes out, knocking Speedball far away, so the Punisher calls in help. Jennifer is forced to flee the scene as Frank Castle and his followers close in on her. She's knocked down by a powerful blast of energy, but when the Punishers go to find her, Jennifer is gone. Returning home, Peter declares the mission a success. With these supplies, bell curve can be actually used as a weapon. Parker also gives Hank the set of billy clubs, so Beast knows the price that everyone paid for these resources. Hank is sorry over the loss of Elektra, but Peter confesses after everything that's happened, this stuff hardly even bothers him anymore. Peter sadly admits there's something wrong with him, something missing within. He leaves to go think on things. Elsewhere, Jennifer wakes up, confined and shocked by the identity of her captors. The original Black Panther stands before her, even though he should have died 6 years ago. It takes the Blues no time at all to get Bell Curve ready for use. With their secret weapon ready, it is time to act. The Blues have only 6 months of fuel left, and in 8 months, the people will begin to starve. Steve sadly believes the only way out of this is through war. Peter asks his friend if there's anything he could do to help, and Steve tells the young man to bring him his shield. Jennifer has fallen out of contact, so Tony wants to go find her. Bucky thinks this is a bad idea, but Tony has absolute faith in his friend handling things while Stark is gone. He gives Barnes full authorization over Iron Forces, and heads out towards the Blue. On his way, he is surprised when his suit detects Jennifer within the Divide. This makes no sense, as there isn't supposed to be anyone down here. This place is a graveyard, generally avoided by both sides out of grief for what happened here. Confused, Tony flies in to examine things further. Meanwhile, on the Iron side of the Divide, Tony's forces detect a heavy cloud setting in. They are suddenly attacked by Frank Castle. With Iron Man's guards at the Divide taken out, Frank radios the Blues and tells them they can move in. Watching this from his facility hidden within the Divide, Black Panther comments that things should be quite interesting from here on out. He explains that he personally destroyed the negative zone and engineered the entire division, deliberately killing millions in the process. The entire war has been the result of his subtle influence over the years, keeping Tony and Steve's attention squarely focused on one another, while he prepared. Outside, Iron Man breaks into Black Panther's base, only for Tony to be attacked by several projectiles. Above ground, Cap's entire military force moves across the Divide. Steve speaks to his people of the long rift they have endured, and the hardships his people have suffered because of it. Unless they act now, everything they have fought for will be lost. He points out the bridge built by Miriam and her people to symbolize the hope that the two sides could coexist. He declares the Iron views the Blue as a nuisance. They want to take everything. Miriam is dead. The dream is gone. There's no going back. Today, the war ends. Tony is taken to T'Challa, who affirms that the years of war occurred in spite of Tony and Steve's efforts, not because of it. They've both been manipulated into all of this, and now, the two sides are about to slaughter each other. The Black Panther explains he came here to conquer this domain, but that plan failed. So instead of making a war, he chose to use one. He pitted the two sides against each other, all for this moment of total chaos between the two nations. When the battle that's about to happen above is over, Panther and his troops will be able to easily conquer the survivors. Tony says he knows this isn't the real Black Panther. The real T'Challa was way too smart to leave Tony alive. But this imposter is not impressed by such declarations. Tony has no armor, allies, or weapons here. And without his tech, he's just another man. Stark scolds his captor. He doesn't advertise all his tech for this very reason. He reminds the imposter that once he cloned a Thor. In retrospect, it might not have been the best idea in the world, but the tech work wonders. The imposter collapses to the floor, and Tony now knows what he is dealing with. Frankie, Queen of the Skrulls. The man finds himself surrounded by these aliens, ready to kill their little pawn. High above all of this, the battle begins in full. Bucky commands the Iron, but Carol doesn't care for his brutal tactics. She demands to speak to Tony, but Barnes doesn't want to hear this. Focusing on the battle at hand, he says he is in charge, and he simply doesn't care what she thinks. Below, Tony and a freed Jennifer battles the Skrulls together, but Ferengi disappears. Stark knows they have to warn the others. Jennifer agrees, but says there's more going on here, and has to tell him about something she learned in Steeltown first. They have a traitor in their midst. Meanwhile, Rogers pushes on with the bell curve device, taunting the Iron's heroes into attacking him directly. The heroes take the bait and are drawn in. Steve expertly fights them off, and tells Peter he's about to activate Bell Curve. Parker has his powered troops pull out of the blast radius immediately to avoid losing the powers themselves, including the new Hulk battling at Cap's side. Rogers insists he stay with Bell Curve and make sure it goes off, and seeing how badly outnumbered Steve is, the Hulk decides to stick around too. In the air, Bucky is getting impatient, insisting that his troops begin bombing everyone regardless of whose side they're on. When the others question this order, Bucky threatens them, until Tony's armor suddenly takes off from the helicarrier. Deep within the divide, She-Hulk decides to stay behind and fight off the Skrulls as long as she can. Tony doesn't want her to do this, but she points out this is the kind of stuff they used to be all about, and it feels good to be a hero again. The two kiss one last time before Tony's armor arrives. She has to make the same promise he made not too long ago, to end things, whatever it takes. Tony flies out of the divide, and the Hulk and Rogers immediately spot him. Steve demands that Hulk throw him at the man, though the Hulk is reluctant to comply. That was kind of always Colossus's thing, but regardless, he obeys and throws Rogers into the air. Steve slams into Tony with his shield, and the two men land on the deck of the helicarrier together. Though the crew move in to help their leader, Tony insists on handling this alone, and instead asks them to bring Bucky and Emma Frost here immediately. Steve attacks, while Tony desperately tries to explain what is going on, but Rogers is stubborn and far beyond diplomacy at this point. So Stark slams Cap into a jet fighter, knocking him down. Tony says he'd surrender if he thought that would matter, but doubts it would work, and Cap kind of agrees. So instead, Tony turns to Bucky as his right-hand man arrives on the scene, and outright kills him. The others, who are utterly shocked at this move, are told that Bucky was a Skrull, and must have been for most of the war. Cap ruefully wonders if Bucky ever really came back from the ice. Stark goes on to tell Rogers everything he's learned, how this entire thing was one big setup. Rogers is skeptical, so Stark has Emma telepathically show the man everything Tony has just seen. Steve learns the truth and realizes just how badly they have been used. He confesses to the existence of Bell Curve, and how he's about to depower Tony's troops in one fell attack, leaving both sides badly vulnerable to the Skrulls who are standing by, waiting for this very moment. Though on some level, Tony is impressed by Rogers' ingenuity in all of this, both men know what they must do. Tony comments that Jennifer is in the divide, but they also both agree they have no choice but to abandon her to her fate. The entire kingdom hangs in the balance. Cap contacts the Hulk and orders him to drop Bell Curve into the divide. The Hulk is confused by the orders, but Logan's a good soldier, and obeys. He flings the bomb into the canyon, and Steve pulls the trigger, but nothing happens. Reasoning the signal must be getting interference from the battle, the two agree to head down there and activate it themselves. Inside the divide, they find the bomb, but its casing has been damaged. Tony thinks he can fix it, but the Skrulls are closing in on their location. Cap pulls them off as best he can, while the two men decide that everyone deserves to know the truth. Tony claims Emma could broadcast this information to everyone, but she'll need access to Cap's mental comms network. Reluctantly, Cap, knowing this information could be used to incapacitate his entire army in one fell move, puts his faith in Tony and complies anyway. Emma gets the order and broadcasts the truth to everyone. Commenting she's about to inform two armies that they have been unwitting pawns for years, used by shape-shifting aliens, she is delighted to see what will happen next. Both sides are shocked and can hardly believe this news, but notice that their enemies have the exact same reaction on their faces, and reason this is unlikely to be some kind of trick. The fighting ceases as both armies realize this entire war has been a lie. The heroes of both sides thus charge into the divide to help their leaders, while Cap and Tony watch them descend. They both take a moment to appreciate the actions of their friends. Cap declares it a beautiful sight. Heroes, every one of them. He activates Bell Curve. The bomb is powerful enough to kill Cap, Tony, and most of the Skrulls, while everyone else in the area finds their powers are gone. Those with tech are fine and are able to save those without, while a now powerless Jennifer is able to defeat Ferengi in a single punch. And with that, the long war ended. 2 months later, Peter and Jennifer meet on the new bridge being constructed over the divide. Ferengi was turned over to the Punisher, who is rooting out the surviving Skrull agents on both sides. Peter points out that as much as the two sides would like to blame the Skrulls, both the Iron and the Blue know they helped them along every step of the way. Things are getting better though. The Iron and the Blue are trading and helping each other out, though there are still difficulties. Unification, even now, still feels like a dream. Feelings are still raw and bitter, but families are reuniting, including Peter's. It's a step forward. Peter and Jen agree to meet up next week, as they have been for some time. But before they leave, Jennifer has one question for him. She asks if he thinks Tony and Steve depowered everyone on purpose before they died, for the sake of unity, as a symbol for the end of the war and a means to reduce the tension between both regions. Peter doesn't know, but there is one thing he is absolutely certain of. He really doesn't want to fight about it. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is the complete story of Civil War: The Secret Wars tie-in. So thanks for watching this video. Given the fact that Civil War the movie is out this week, and the comic event Civil War 2 is on the horizon, and that I've already talked about the original Civil War, it felt like a great time to talk about this tie-in that so many readers enjoyed. So here we are, almost a year past the beginning of the Secret Wars, with yet another tie-in. I have to say I actually didn't mind going back and doing another one of these. They were always a lot of fun, and out of all the tie-ins to cover, I'm really glad I get to be able to talk about Civil War. I have already talked about this comic once before, actually. You can see some of my thoughts on Civil War in my top 10 Secret Wars tie-ins video. Civil War actually earned the number 3 spot on that list, and after reading it again for this video, I have to say it really deserved that place. Considering how many good tie-ins there were to Secret Wars, seeing Civil War as the third best of them really does say a lot about it. But let's look into this comic with a bit more detail to see why I think that. There it is a little choppy, I'll admit that, and it takes some getting used to, but I really do like it. Lionel Francis Yu, and I really apologize if I mispronounced that name, but he did stellar work here, and the facial expressions in particular express volumes about these characters and their history. That excellent character work shows in the writing too, and Charles Soule did such a great job here that I do feel his little 5-issue tie-in somehow works better and pays off more than either the original Civil War or even the Secret Wars core series. How does Soule achieve such a feat? Well, mostly through careful, attentive writing. Soule shows a solid understanding of the original Civil War, and he uses a lot of that knowledge to inform the tie-in and enhance the story with little details that give it a lot of life. The use of characters like Miriam Sharp and Speedball are proof of this, and I find the whole Skrull connection pretty clever given how the original Civil War was followed up on by Secret Invasion. He also seems to do a better job with some of the issues of the original Civil War. In particular, Iron Man's super relatable in this comic. If anything, he's the hero that's easier to follow than Cap. Both are pretty good though, and you can empathize with these guys and understand why they're doing what they're doing, which for a lot of the original Civil War you just can't. The ending's really good too. It's a little rushed, I'll admit, but it's a lot better than the original Civil War's ending, and on the whole works for me overall. Coupled with solid character work all around, including multiple arcs for quite a few characters considering there's only 5 comics here, that all really pay off really nicely. Soule does a lot in only 5 comics. When I was writing the script, the first comic's content alone totaled an astounding 4 pages, when a regular comic usually translates to about a page or a page and a half for a normal recap. That's because there's a lot happening in a relatively short amount of time. That's this comic's one potential fault. There's so much happening here that at times the story does feel a little bit rushed, especially as I said near the end. However, though this is a problem with the comic, it's still a really good tie-in. It exists within the framework of Battleworld while also telling a powerful story all on its own. You really don't need to know anything about Secret Wars to appreciate this comic, so it's a fun read for people with even the most basic understanding of the Marvel Universe. I greatly enjoyed this, and I'm not the only one. This particular tie-in got a lot of critical and fan praise, and I can see why. One reviewer even went so far as to say that they'd like to see Marvel making the War Zone the new prime universe for future comics, because this world was so interesting and such a unique take on the universe that they really wanted to see more. Though I don't think I'd go that far personally, as such an idea would probably get old really quickly, I do share the sentiment of wanting to see more. It would be great if we could revisit the War Zone in some capacity one day, because there's a lot to like and a lot more I'd like to see. Between Peter Parker becoming a hybrid of Spider-Man and a Falcon, to King Hawk, or even Wolverine as the Hulk, this is a very cool little world Soul created with a lot of fun ideas. There's also some depth going on here that could be explored a bit further. Sure, there isn't much time in this tie-in for the political and philosophical ramifications of this story, but in a few panels there's hints of something deeper going on. Imagine what an event like St. Louis would have done to a real country. If Stanford or 9/11 made America lose its mind in both fiction and real life, imagine the devastation of losing 15 million people in such a graphic public display like it happened in the comic. With a disaster so big that a country is literally and permanently scarred. What would that do to a society? What would change about us because of it? Civil War explores that idea and does it well. The people and their spirits are broken and worn down. The divide between people is real, and I think it does a really good job at emulating one of the more interesting aspects of any historical civil war. Brothers fighting brothers, families torn apart, chaos within a once unified nation. One thing I really like about this tie-in is the ending for that reason. Rushed as it may be, I really like how the story doesn't end with the country magically setting aside their differences and enjoying living happily ever after. The divide is still there at the end of the story. The tensions and problems between these two nations has not gone away. Things have progressed, and they are much, much better. But unification, if it ever was to come, is going to take a long time. They are taking the right steps. Trade has opened up, and people from the Iron are mentioned to have been migrating into the Blue. And that will weaken the sense of divide between these two societies, but their problems haven't been solved overnight. That's a really adult way of looking at things, and some really good writing on the part of Soul. I like that detail. In fact, this comic is full of fascinating little details like this. Clint Barton as Venom? That sounds cool. I'd love to see more of that. Elektra becoming Daredevil after Matt dies? That sounds cool. There's just so many neat things in here. But it's the bigger things that are touched on and hinted at here that I think merit further exploration more than anything else. I do hope we get to see the Warzone in some form or another one day. So yes, I definitely recommend these comics. You should get a hold of them if you can, as it's something I think you should check out for yourself. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.